Imagine this. You're standing in a room full of people. Maybe it's a family dinner. Maybe it's a meeting at work. Maybe it's just a casual gathering with people you thought were friends. And someone says something to you. Not a slap, not a shout. Nothing so dramatic that the whole room turns to look. No. It's quieter than that. It's a comment, a tone, a little remark slipped in between smiles, like a razor blade hidden inside a piece of bread. And you feel it. You feel it cut. But you say nothing. You swallow. You smile. You nod. And later that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words come back. They replay. And you think of 100 things you could have said, should have said, but didn't. And that silence, that swallowed pain, it doesn't disappear. It sits inside you like a stone at the bottom of a well, and every time it happens again, another stone drops, and the water rises, and one day you can't breathe. Shalom, dear friends. My name is Adam. I grew up in a home where words were treated like living things. My grandfather Norm, may his memory be a blessing, used to say that a word, once released from the mouth, has legs of its own and walks wherever it pleases. But he also taught me something else, something I didn't fully understand until I was much older. He taught me that silence, the wrong kind of silence, the silence of a person who accepts disrespect without a whisper, that silence also has legs. And it walks straight into your soul and tears down the walls. Today we are going to talk about something that touches every single one of you. I know this because I've lived it, I've watched others live it, and I've seen the damage it leaves behind. We are going to talk about what to say, the exact words to use, when someone disrespects you. Not to start a war. Not to humiliate them back. But to draw a line in the sand so clean, so calm, so unshakable that the other person has no choice but to reconsider how they speak to you. And more importantly, you will reconsider how you speak to yourself. I will share with you 3 phrases, 3 sets of words, that carry within them an ancient power. They are simple. A child could say them. But their effect, when spoken with the right spirit, is extraordinary. I've seen relationships transform. I've seen bullies go quiet. I've seen people who spent decades shrinking themselves suddenly stand at full height. And I ask you, please, to stay with me until the very end. Because in the finale, I will share one truth, a single sentence my grandfather told me on a winter evening when I was 17 years old, that ties everything together. Without that truth, the 3 phrases are just words. With it, they become armor. Let me set the stage. Disrespect is one of the oldest diseases of human interaction. It didn't arrive with social media. It didn't start in modern offices or crowded cities. It has existed since the first time one person looked at another and thought, I can make myself bigger by making you smaller. That's the root. That's always been the root. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every interruption, every cruel joke disguised as humor, every passive-aggressive remark wrapped in a smile, it all grows from the same poison seed, the belief that another person's dignity is a resource you can spend to inflate your own. Grandfather Norm had a saying for this. He'd sit at the kitchen table, stirring his tea with that old bent spoon, and he'd say, Adam, a person who steps on others to feel tall is not tall. They are standing on a pile of broken things, and one day that pile collapses. He was right. He was always right. But knowing that someone else is wrong doesn't help you when you're the one being stepped on. What helps you is knowing what to do about it. And that is what we will explore together now. The first phrase I want to give you, the first set of words, I call the mirror. Think about what a mirror does. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fight. It doesn't run away. It simply shows you exactly what you look like. Most people who disrespect you are counting on one thing. They are counting on you to absorb it. They expect you to take the blow, to look away, to laugh it off, to pretend it didn't happen. Because when you absorb it, they win twice. Once by saying it, and once by watching you accept it. The mirror takes that power away. The phrase is this, is that how you really see this? Or, in its slightly longer form, I want to make sure I understand. Is that really what you meant to say to me? Now, listen carefully. These words are not spoken with anger. They are not spoken with sarcasm. They are spoken calmly, The way you would ask someone to repeat a strange sound you heard in the distance. Genuine curiosity. Steady eyes.
No trembling.
You are not attacking. You are reflecting. You are holding up a mirror and saying, look at yourself. Look at what just came out of your mouth. And I want you to see it clearly before we go any further. Why does this work? Because most disrespect operates in the shadows. It thrives on ambiguity. The person who insults you at a dinner table often does it in a way that allows them to retreat. Oh, I was just joking. You're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that. The mirror removes the shadow. It puts their words under bright light and asks them to own what they said. And in that moment, something fascinating happens. They either have to double down, which exposes them completely, or they have to back away, which means they've already begun to change. Let me tell you about a woman I knew. Her name was Leah. Leah was 53 years old, a schoolteacher, kind to the bone, the sort of person who remembered everyone's birthday and always had an extra umbrella to lend. Leah had an older sister named Dina. Dina was the kind of woman who could deliver an insult so smoothly you didn't feel the wound until hours later. Every family gathering, every phone call, there was always a comment. About Leah's weight. About Leah's apartment. About the fact that Leah never married. Still alone. Leah? Well, some people are meant to have cats. Said with a laugh. Said in front of cousins, aunts, neighbors. And Leah would smile. She'd change the subject. She'd go to the kitchen and wash dishes she hadn't dirted, just to have something to do with her shaking hands. One autumn evening, I happened to be visiting Leah. She was a neighbor of my father, Samuel. We were having tea, and she was telling me about the previous Shabbat dinner at her sister's house. Dina had said, in front of everyone, Leah still teaches children because she never grew up herself. And Leah had laughed along with the table. But now, in her own kitchen, telling me about it, her eyes were wet. I said, Leah, can I ask you something? How many years has this been happening? She thought about it. Maybe 30, she said. Maybe longer. 30 years. 30 years of swallowed stones. I told her about the mirror. I said, next time Dina says something like that, don't laugh. Don't cry. Don't argue. Just look at her calmly and say, Dina, I want to make sure I understand. Is that really what you meant to say to me? And then wait. Don't fill the silence. Let her sit in it. Leah called me 2 weeks later. Her voice was different. Lighter. She told me what happened. At a family brunch, Dina made a comment about Leah's cooking. Something about how Leah's soup was almost edible this time. A few people chuckled uncomfortably. And Leah, for the first time in 3 decades, put down her spoon, looked her sister in the eyes, and said, Dina, I want to make sure I understand. Is that really what you meant to say about my cooking, here, in front of everyone? The table went silent. Dina's smile froze. She stammered something, tried to laugh, but no one laughed with her. And then she said, quietly, I was just playing around. And Leah said, I see. Nothing more.
No explosión. No tears.
But something shifted in that room. Something shifted in that family. And something shifted inside Leah. She told me, Adam, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small at that table. That, my friends, is the power of the mirror. If you recognize yourself in Leah's story, if you have been laughing at jokes that hurt you, absorbing comments that chip away at your soul, I want you to practice this phrase. Not as a weapon, but as a shield. A clear, calm, polished shield that simply reflects back what was thrown at you. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain yourself. You just need to ask, with quiet dignity, is that really what you meant to say? And let the truth do its own work. Now, the second phrase. I call this one the boundary stone. In the old villages, when 2 families lived next to each other, there was always a stone placed at the border between the lands. Not a wall. Not a fence with barbed wire. Just a stone. And everyone knew what it meant. This is where my land ends and yours begins. You are welcome on your side. But if you cross this stone without my permission, we have a problem. The boundary stone phrase works the same way. It is this: I don't accept that. Or, more fully, you're free to think what you want, but I don't accept being spoken to that way. Notice what's happening here. You are not telling the other person what to do. You are not commanding them to change. You are not begging. You are simply stating a fact about yourself. I don't accept that. It's not a negotiation. It's not a debate. It's a declaration. And it's one of the most powerful things a human being can say because it doesn't depend on the other person's agreement. They can agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. You've placed your stone. Grandfather Norm had a neighbor, an old carpenter named Boris. Boris was a quiet man, built like a barrel, with hands that could shape a wardrobe from raw planks but a voice so gentle you'd think he was talking to birds. Boris had a business partner, a man named Gregor, who was loud, sharp, and had a habit of belittling Boris in front of clients. Boris is good with his hands, but don't ask him to think, Gregor would say, and laugh. Boris would say nothing. He'd just keep sanding his wood, eyes down, jaw tight. One day my grandfather was in Boris's workshop, picking up a bookshelf he'd ordered. Gregor was there, and he made one of his usual remarks. Something about how Boris couldn't count past 10 without removing his shoes. My grandfather watched Boris's face, the muscles in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the sandpaper a little too hard. After Gregor left, my grandfather sat down on the workbench and said, "Boris, let me ask you something. If a stranger walked into your workshop and started moving your tools, rearranging your wood, throwing your nails on the floor, what would you do?" Boris looked at him like it was the strangest question in the world. "I'd tell him to stop," he said. "I'd tell him this is my workshop and he has no right." My grandfather nodded. "Then why do you let Gregor walk into your dignity and throw everything on the floor?" Boris was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because I don't want to cause trouble." And my grandfather said something I've never forgotten. He said, "Boris, the trouble already exists. You just decided to be the one who carries all of it." The next time Gregor made a comment in front of a client, Boris stopped working. He put down his tool. He turned to Gregor and said, in that quiet, gentle voice of his, "Gregor, you're free to think whatever you want about me, but I don't accept being spoken to that way. Not here. Not anywhere. If you want to continue working together, that changes today." Gregor looked shocked. The client looked relieved. And from that day forward, the comments stopped. Not because Gregor became a better person overnight, but because Boris placed his stone. And Gregor understood, for the first time, that crossing it had a cost. The lesson here is crucial, so let me say it plainly. You are not responsible for other people's behavior, but you are absolutely responsible for what you accept. Every time you accept disrespect in silence, you are not keeping the peace. You are teaching the other person that there is no boundary. You are drawing a map of your soul and handing it to them and saying, "Here, walk wherever you like." The boundary stone changes that. It says, simply, clearly, without anger, "I don't accept that." And the beauty of it is that it requires nothing from the other person. It only requires something from you. It requires you to believe, in the marrow of your bones, that you deserve to be spoken to with basic respect. And if you struggle to believe that, if years of swallowed stones have convinced you that maybe you don't deserve it, then let me tell you what my father Samuel told me when I was young and doubting myself. He said, "Adam, your worth was decided before you were born. No one alive has the authority to reduce it." Let me tell you about the third phrase now, and this one, I must warn you, is the most difficult to use. Not because the words are complicated. The words are simple. It's difficult because it requires something that goes against every instinct we have when we are hurt. It requires composure. It requires you to stand in the fire and not burn. I call this phrase the door, because it gives the other person a choice, and it shows them the exit. The phrase is this: if you continue to speak to me this way, I will remove myself from this conversation. Or, even shorter, if this continues, I'm going to walk away, and we can try again when there's respect. The door is not a threat. A threat is born from weakness, from desperation, from the desire to control. The door is born from strength. It is born from the calm, unshakable knowledge that your presence is valuable, that your time and energy are not infinite resources to be drained by someone who treats you like a lesser being. When you offer the door, you are saying something profound. You are saying, I want to be here. I want to have this relationship, this conversation, this connection, but not at the cost of my dignity. And if you choose to continue disrespecting me, I will quietly, peacefully, without drama, leave. The choice is yours. There was a man I worked with years ago. His name was Haim. Haim was a software developer, brilliant mind, the kind of person who could solve problems in his sleep, but he had a manager named Victor who treated him like furniture. Victor would interrupt Haim in meetings, dismiss his ideas with a wave of his hand, and once, in front of the entire team, said, Haim, why don't you just do what you're told instead of pretending you have opinions? The room went cold. Everyone stared at their laptops. And Haim, as he had done 100 times before, said nothing. He went back to his desk, put on his headphones, and worked late into the evening, alone, while the office emptied. Haim and I would sometimes have lunch together at a small cafe near the office. He'd order the same thing every time, a bowl of lentil soup and black bread, and he'd eat slowly, like a man trying to digest more than food. One day he told me about Victor's latest outburst. Victor had called his code amateur hour in front of a client. I watched Haim's face as he told me. There was no anger. That's what worried me. The anger was gone. In its place was something worse, acceptance. He had begun to believe that Victor was right. I said, Haim, let me tell you something my grandmother Rachel once told my mother. She said, when you sit at a table where they serve you poison and call it food, the problem isn't the poison. The problem is that you keep sitting down to eat. Haim looked at me. What am I supposed to do? He's my manager. I can't just quit. I said, I'm not asking you to quit. I'm asking you to open a door. Next time Victor speaks to you that way, say this, calmly, without emotion. Victor, if you continue to speak to me this way, I'm going to step out of this meeting and we can revisit this when there's mutual respect. And then, Haim, if he continues, you stand up, you gather your things quietly, and you walk out. Not in anger. In dignity. Haim was terrified. I could see it in his eyes. He'd spent years believing that standing up for himself meant risking everything. But I told him something that I want to tell you right now. The risk of staying silent is always greater than the risk of speaking up. Always. Because when you stay silent, you lose something no job, no relationship, no amount of comfort can replace. You lose yourself. Piece by piece, comment by comment, swallowed insult by swallowed insult, you disappear. It took Haim 3 more weeks. 3 more weeks of Victor's poison. But then it happened. In a team meeting, Victor interrupted Haim mid-sentence and said, Nobody asked for your analysis, Haim. Just run the numbers and keep quiet. Haim closed his laptop. He looked at Victor. And he said, in a voice so calm it almost sounded like a prayer, Victor, I've listened to comments like this for a long time. If you continue to speak to me this way, I'm going to leave this meeting, and I'm happy to continue the conversation when there's respect. Victor left. Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. Haim stood up. He picked up his laptop, tucked in his chair, and walked out of the room without another word. Now here is what happened next, and this is the part that most people don't expect. The room didn't collapse. The company didn't fire him. Victor didn't win. In fact, the opposite happened. 2 other team members came to Haim's desk afterward and said, quietly, we are glad someone finally said something. The head of department heard about the incident and had a conversation with Victor. Not because of some complaint Haim filed. He never filed one. But because when a person walks out of a room with that kind of dignity, it creates a ripple. It makes everyone in the room look at themselves. It makes the bully look at themselves. Victor never apologized. Some people don't have that in them, and you must accept that too. But he changed his behavior toward Haim. Not out of love. Out of understanding. He understood that Haim's presence in that room was no longer guaranteed. He understood that Haim had a door, and he was willing to use it. And that changed everything. So let me speak directly to you now. If there is someone in your life who consistently disrespects you, whether it's a family member, a colleague, a partner, a so-called friend, I want you to understand something. You are not trapped. You may feel trapped. You may have convinced yourself that you have no options, that you need this person more than they need you, that the cost of speaking up is too high. But that is the voice of accumulated stones talking. That is the weight of every swallowed insult pressing down on your chest and telling you to stay still, stay quiet, stay small. You have 3 phrases now. The mirror, is that really what you meant to say? The boundary stone, I don't accept being spoken to that way. And the door, if this continues, I'll walk away until there's respect. Each one serves a different purpose. The mirror exposes. The boundary stone declares. The door acts. And together, they form something remarkable. They form a language of self-respect that doesn't require you to shout, to fight, to humiliate, or to run. They allow you to stand exactly where you are, at your full height, and say with quiet power, I am here, and I matter, and you will treat me accordingly or you will have this conversation alone. But now, as I promised you at the beginning, I want to share the truth that ties everything together. Because you can memorize these 3 phrases. You can practice them in the mirror. You can rehearse them before every family dinner and every work meeting. But if you don't understand this one thing, they will crumble like dry bread in your hands. I was 17 years old. It was a winter evening, snow falling so thick you could barely see the streetlights. I was sitting with Grandfather Norm in his study, a small room with more books than walls, and I was upset. A boy at school had been mocking me for weeks, making fun of my accent, my clothes, the way I carried my books. I told my grandfather everything, every word, every burning humiliation. And when I finished, I expected him to give me something sharp to say back, some clever retort, some weapon made of words. But instead, he was quiet for a long time. He looked at the snow through the window. And then he said, Adam, listen to me. A person who does not respect himself will teach the entire world to disrespect him. And a person who holds his own worth like a flame in his chest will never need to raise his voice, because the flame is visible from across the room. That is the secret. That is the root. The 3 phrases work only, and I mean only, when they come from a place of genuine self-respect, not arrogance, not pride, not the desperate performance of someone trying to seem confident. Real, quiet, bone-deep knowledge that you are worthy of dignity. When Leah used the mirror, it worked not because the words were magic, but because for the first time in 30 years, she believed she deserved better. When Boris placed his boundary stone, it held not because the words were strong, but because something inside Boris had finally said, enough. When Chaim opened the door, Victor felt the weight of it not because Chaim was powerful, but because Chaim's self-respect filled the room like sunlight. So before you use these phrases, before you walk into that next conversation, that next dinner, that next meeting, I want you to do one thing. I want you to sit with yourself, quietly, honestly, and I want you to ask, do I believe I deserve to be treated with respect? And if the answer is shaky, if decades of disrespect have eroded that belief, then your first task is not to change someone else's behavior. Your first task is to rebuild the foundation inside yourself. Because as Grandfather Norm said, the flame must exist before it can be seen. And here is what I've learned after many years of watching people, after listening to their stories, after carrying my own stones and learning, one painful afternoon at a time, to set them down. Disrespect from others is a mirror, too. It shows you not what you're worth, but what you've been willing to accept. And the moment you stop accepting it, the moment you plant your feet and speak those calm, clear words, the mirror changes. Not because the world suddenly becomes kind. The world has never promised kindness, but because you have changed your position in it. You are no longer the person who absorbs. You are the person who reflects. The conclusion is as simple as bread on the table. What you tolerate, you invite. What you accept in silence, you receive in abundance. And what you refuse with dignity, you never have to carry again. The 3 phrases I've given you today are tools, yes, but the hand that holds them must be steady. And the only thing that steadies your hand is the deep, unwavering belief that you, exactly as you are, sitting where you are right now, watching this video, deserve to be spoken to with the same respect you give to others. That is not arrogance. That is not selfishness. That is the quiet courage that my grandfather carried like a lantern through every room he entered, and that I am asking you to carry now. If these words have touched something inside you, if they have reached a place that has been quiet for too long, I ask you to press that like button. Not for me. For yourself. As a small act of saying, yes, I heard this, and I am going to do something about it. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue walking this road together. Our circle grows not by numbers but by hearts, and yours is welcome here. And I want to ask you something. In the comments below, tell me this. Which of the three phrases, the mirror, the boundary stone, or the door, do you feel you need most in your life right now, and why? What is the situation where you've been swallowing stones, and what would it mean for you to finally speak? I read every comment. Not to count them, but to understand you. Because your stories teach me just as much as any book on my grandfather's shelf, and I am grateful for every word you share. In the next video, we are going to go even deeper. Because today we talked about what to say when someone disrespects you. But next time, we will talk about something harder, something most people never examine. We will talk about the disrespect you inflict on yourself, the phrases you repeat inside your own head, the silent cruelty you show yourself when no one is watching. And I will share with you the words that can heal that, too. Until then, carry your flame. Speak your truth. And remember, the stones you refuse to swallow are the stones you never have to carry. Shalom, dear friends. I'll see you in the next one.